Sonic Mania 2 has recently made its way back into Sonic discussions after it seemingly went away with the release of Sonic Superstars, but that's because we finally got our first look at what Sonic Mania 2 could have been, as well as confirmation that there was some sort of work being done on it at one point in time. So before we jump into it, make sure to hit the like button if you enjoyed the video, and subscribe while you're at it, but now it's time for some Sonic Mania 2. For Sonic Mania's 8th anniversary, Christian Whitehead, one of the main developers of Sonic Mania, shared an image of an unreleased 2.5D Sonic game similar to that of Sonic Superstars, but with a different art style, and it was a game that his team Evening Star was working on that is assumed to be the sequel to Sonic Mania. In the image, we can see a new zone that looks similar to Mirage Saloon, which has been called the Outback by people like T-Lopes, and there's also a close-up of a new badnik called the Kanga Klanga, which actually eventually made its way into Sonic Superstars. According to the post, the badnik would have used its legs to kick Sonic backwards. Now these images did look familiar to some, especially people familiar with Evening Star's work, because the art style looks pretty similar to a game they made in 2024, Penny's Big Breakaway, which honestly is pretty underrated in my opinion. I almost never see anybody talking about this game, and my video on it actually got more views than there are Steam reviews of the game itself. Anyways, it's probably pretty likely that this is what eventually led into Penny's Big Breakaway even being a thing, since again, they do look pretty similar. And the other big piece of Sonic Mania 2 news that we got was an unreleased song made by T-Lopes. It sounds incredible because all of T-Lopes' music does, but to me, I can kind of hear the beginnings of what eventually turned into some of Penny's Big Breakaway music, just in style, not necessarily the song itself or anything, but that's because T-Lopes also did some of the music for that game as well. So this unreleased prototype, if it even got that far, is eventually what turned into Sonic Superstars and Penny's Big Breakaway. Now I don't think this game was ever actually cancelled, because Sonic Mania 2 wasn't ever truly in development at Sega. These screenshots and music were just some ideas that were floating around for a potential sequel to Sonic Mania, so no, you still can't blame Sonic Superstars or Penny's Big Breakaway for the cancellation of Sonic Mania 2. I mean, you could if you wanted, but it wouldn't really get you anywhere. Instead, I think we should really focus on the Sonic Mania 2 part specifically, because man, now that we know there was at least something in the conceptual phase here, I really wish we could have gotten to see it fully realized. So then, Sonic Mania 2. What should it have been like? Well, first off, I think we either ditch the Mania title, or at least change it up for the sequel by making this a completely original 2D or 2.5D Sonic game, just like Sonic Superstars or that concept art was. Sonic Mania reused old levels and themes once, and it certainly worked the first time, but at this point I think a lot of Sonic fans, myself included, are getting really tired of reused levels and themes, so for Sonic Mania 2, I would definitely like to see no old levels in here at all. The Outback was already a great start, since it's not anything we've seen before. I mean, it's a bit similar to Mirage Saloon, but most other desert levels probably would be, so I think there was already a good start here with making sure that we had new level themes. Sonic Mania had 12 full zones, and I think that was the perfect length, so I wouldn't change anything there. Just maybe don't do what Sonic Superstars did with the whole one long act for certain zones, like Sky Temple or Sand Sanctuary, because I didn't really like that there was only one act in those. Or actually, better idea, if there was gonna be one-act zones at all, then I think they could take something from Superstars, which are the character-specific acts, and put those as additional levels for those one-act zones. That way there's still technically 2 acts for every zone, just some that are character-specific, because for some reason in Sonic Superstars, all of the character-specific levels were in zones that already had 2 acts. And as for if the game should be 2D or 2.5D, I wouldn't really complain either way, but I'd be lying if I said I didn't prefer traditional 2D classic Sonic over his 3D model counterpart. However, if it's the same as that 2.5D art style from the concept art from Evening Star, then honestly I'd be willing to give it a shot, cause it'd be something new and might turn out pretty cool. Sonic Superstars was of course 2.5D, and while I think the game itself looks fine, some of the zones and backgrounds can look pretty bland, whereas everything in Sonic Mania looks incredible and is like peak classic Sonic art style to me. All of the character designs, animations, and stage aesthetics are pretty much at their best in Sonic Mania, so if they did decide to move away from all that, they would definitely have their work cut out for them in order to make something that looks just as good. Now as for the story, bosses, characters, and all that kind of stuff, well, I think we should definitely not do the Superstars bosses again, because those are pure torture. Most of them either take too long, yes, I know you can beat some of them really quickly, but that still doesn't make all of them good, and also some of them have crazy insane difficulty spikes. It took me forever to beat the final Fang boss of Trip's story because of all the one-shot attacks. And also the final boss of that game literally came out of nowhere, but thankfully Sonic Mania was a lot more tightly woven together, and I don't think a big grand story is really necessary for the game to be good. Something simple that makes sense can work really well in a game with no dialogue. Just look at the other classic Sonic games. And even Mania itself was pretty simple, with the Phantom Ruby being used by Eggman to warp reality, hence the old levels and all that stuff. And we've already seen one new Badnik in the concept art, which technically isn't new anymore since it was reused in Superstars, but that does mean we could have new Badniks for sure. As for the playable characters, the obvious Sonic, Tails, and Knuckles trio is pretty much guaranteed here, but I also think Amy Rose has pretty much cemented herself as a mainstay classic character now, with her inclusion in Origins Plus and Superstars, so I would really like to see how she would feel in a Mania-style classic game. Now, as for Mighty and Ray, as cool as I think their inclusions were in Sonic Mania Plus, I honestly wouldn't be too upset if they didn't include them this time around. I always thought Encore mode was a neat bonus, but I preferred playing the main mode of Mania more, and if Mighty and Ray were to be included, that doesn't mean Encore mode also has to come back, but if Team Sonic plus Amy were already the main characters here, then I'd be perfectly satisfied with just those four. And who knows, they could always do a future plus DLC with Mighty and Ray, or maybe even other classic characters like a playable Fang, since he wasn't playable in Superstars, or even someone like Metal Sonic. I'd rather give other characters the playable spotlight this time around, instead of just having the exact same roster as last time, besides, you know, the main three. So why does there need to be a Sonic Mania 2? Okay, well, maybe that's a little clickbaity, because there doesn't literally need to be one, but hey, are you really trying to tell me you don't want a Sonic Mania 2? Because I certainly want one. As annoying as it probably is to hear this nowadays, Sonic Mania was one of the most critically acclaimed Sonic games in a long time, and this game was loved by not only Sonic fans themselves, but also other video game fans, and even critics who had pretty much no interest in Sonic prior to Mania. Now, even though as a Sonic fan, none of that really matters, it's still important to get new people interested in the series with good games and media, as we've seen over the past few years with the movies and stuff like Frontiers, and having those good 2D classic Sonic games that come out every so often is a great way to continue doing just that. It's even more of a reasonable ask if Christian Whitehead's team Evening Star is the primary developer, since that means the main Team Sonic wouldn't need to focus on it and all the other Sonic games they've got going on. That's what they did with Superstars, leaving almost all of the development to Arzest, and was also how Sonic Mania was developed, so they could definitely do it again a third time. I think it's especially important to capitalize on making a good classic Sonic game now, since the Sonic brand is in a really good spot, because they could definitely sell way more copies of the game nowadays just by having Sonic's face on it than they could have 8 years ago. I think making a Sonic Mania 2 would be a great way to get an even wider audience of new or returning Sonic fans, since that's what the first game was able to do, and also, who wouldn't just want more awesome Sonic games? Personally, I just want Sonic Mania 2 because I think it'd be really fun to play, since that's what Sonic Mania was, so of course I want more of it. It's kinda crazy that there hasn't been, or really never even was, a Sonic Mania 2 in development, just concepts being tossed around. And while those concepts did eventually turn into 2 separate games, I still do wish that the original idea of a Sonic Mania sequel came to be. But what do you think? What cool ideas should be in Sonic Mania 2? Drop some comments down below and let me know. And thanks for watching the video. I'll see you next time.